Hello and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, the guide to Italian travel. I'm Darcy Melton.
And I'm Nathaniel Mellor. In today's episode, we're going to talk about common types of crime in Italy and how you can stay safe during your trip.
Yeah, but before we get into that, we just want to thank everybody who has followed us and left us a review. It helps us a lot in the algorithm, and it also makes us happy as human beings.
It absolutely does. Thank you so much.
So you can go ahead and follow us wherever you're listening right now if you like us, and leave a review. That would be really, really nice. Thank you so much.
And if you'd like to, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can reach out to us at Only a Bag Podcast on Instagram. You can just send us a message and we'll respond. If emailing is your thing, we have onlyabagpodcast at gmail.com. It's still quite new, so I'm still my brain reverts to the old one, but it's onlyabagpodcast at gmail.com. You can send us an email there, questions, comments, concerns, and we have a website, onlyabag.com. In that website, we also have a little comment box.
So many ways to contact us.
So many ways to contact us. We're very, very open to communication. Mm-hmm. Last but not least, if you would like to support the podcast, in the description below, you can find links, affiliate links to various different websites like Booking, Expedia, Agoda, and our personal favorite, Trusted House Sitters. We do a lot of house sitting. It is a sort of an aggregate site for house sitting. So if you are looking for a house sitter, or if you are looking to become a house sitter, which is essentially just taking care of somebody else's pets in a foreign country, very much like Italy, you can do so. In the link below, it's free to sign up for an account. You can see the available house sits without signing up for an account, but they kind of keep popping up with that little pop-up box saying, are you sure you don't want to sign up right now?
Yeah, it's easier if you are interested to go ahead and sign up. They will send you emails occasionally, but then you can see what's available. But in order to book a house sit or book a house sitter for your own home, you do have to pay. And there are different levels.
Tiers,
tiers. Thank you. Exactly.
And they do start roughly, I think they start at something like $200 and change, or $180, something like that, which is a little bit steep, I think, but in comparison to a hotel room, it's not bad, because that's $200 something is for the year. So is for 12 months, I should say. So it's a pretty good deal if you like the idea of staying somewhere for free. And without further ado, I guess we're just going to jump into today's episode.
Let's talk about crime.
Yeah.
Dun, dun.
This is where Only a Bag becomes a crime podcast for a very brief, limited run.
Yeah, not really, though. We're not going to tell you any crime stories. We're going to tell you how to avoid crime.
And we're also really not going to get too much into crime statistics. But that being said, let's very briefly just talk about crime statistics, I think, only because Naples historically has been seen as a very crime-ridden city, yes. I think is a fair way to put it. The Palermo in Sicily, Sicily in general, everyone I think associates Sicily with the mob, mm-hmm. Or the mafia specifically, the Cosa Nostra. So there's a sense that Italy, I think, has this gang life, this organized crime life that you have to be careful for when you're here traveling. And while there might be some truth to that, there for the vast majority of tourists, like 97% of tourists, you're not going to be in the places where organized crime is operating.
And even if you are, it likely will not affect you. There definitely are still some mafia, mob, crime, organized crime, families and organizations that operate, but they aren't targeting tourists.
Correct, yeah.
For example, I think we've talked about this before in another episode, but one of the pizza places that we used to like a lot in Naples, their kitchen was set on fire, or the whole building was set on fire?
I think there was a bomb out front.
Okay, there was a bomb out front.
At 2 a.m.
Yeah, nobody was harmed. The restaurant was harmed in some way, but the point is that they weren't targeting tourists. And often there was another case near Scalea where we stayed once, not in Scalea but a town nearby, where some of the local mob crime families were extorting shop owners for money, for protection money or something like that.
It was also during COVID, so it was a bit of a weird time.
It was very not nice what they were doing.
Yes.
And it did not affect tourists. It was very much on the local level.
Exactly. And I think after those fun stories, it's a good time to go ahead and just maybe jump into the types of crime you might experience. And I think it pretty much boils down to three major, not types of crime, genres of crime, if you will, categories of crime. There are categories, I'll say categories of crime. And that's pickpocketing, scams, and auto theft or auto-related theft. not necessarily stealing cars, but sometimes breaking into cars to steal things. And then I think later we're going to talk about safety while traveling as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Darcy is going to give some thoughts on that. And very briefly, we're going to touch on sort of nighttime clubs, parties, not necessarily like if I go to a club, what should I do, but more the smart things to do if you are at a, well, I guess no, the smart things to do at a club, and also is it safe to walk around at night?
Yeah.
And how late does Italy consider nighttime? Which is a weird question now that I'm saying that out loud. So I think that's the general gist of today's episode.
Plus general safety tips for walking around during the day as a general tourist.
Yeah, and we're going to sprinkle those in like little bits of, I don't know, flavor. Possibly even throw some at the end.
Sprinkles.
Just sprinkles.
Rainbow sprinkles.
Of flavor. So starting with the pickpocketing, that seems to be the biggest form of crime I think that I've seen people vocally be afraid about. Or not afraid, but vocally be worried that it's going to happen to them. I think like on Reddit, there's a couple of travel subreddits dedicated to Italy specifically. There's Rick Steve forums, TripAdvisor, things like that. And people do often ask, what is the likelihood of getting pickpocketed? What are some things I should do to avoid being pickpocketed? I think there are some people like, who say, should I take off my wedding ring while I'm traveling? Should I leave it in a hotel safe? Should I leave it at home? What are, should I not wear certain branded clothing? So I think briefly, we just wanted to address that because it does seem like a big worry when, I think especially when I talked to people, when I first went traveling in 2013, I was talking to people who were traveling in the 90s, and there was definitely a sense of like, yes, you should not wear, big branded clothing. Like if, like North Face, I know a lot of people I bought this North Face jacket and everyone said, you should not wear North Face. That's a well-known brand. It's a few $100s. People are going to know that you're wealthy. So it was a little bit of I don't know. I felt like a little, like there was no right answer. So it's like, don't take the gear that you need in order to not lose the gear. But then if you don't take it, then you won't have it anyway. So it felt like a bit of a catch-22. So with all that being said, pickpocketing, what to do, how you can avoid it.
Can we talk about, you just said North Face. Is that something that you still worry about, wearing North Face gear or big branded stuff?
That's actually a great question because no, and mainly because I think there's been a shift potentially in the way that, and I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but I'm willing to bet there's a shift in the way that Italians dress, specifically younger Italians, maybe for generalization. And I think Superdry, that brand Superdry, is a really good example of this. If you've not heard of Superdry, that's fine. I think they're a Japanese-based brand, but on all of their jackets and clothing, they have this giant font, and it says Superdry.
It's very like streetwear.
Very streetwear. And North Face has kind of copied that to some extent with some of their lines. They have a streetwear line that
especially their backpacks. That's something that I see a lot in big cities, or the big kind of hiker, like city trekker, urban travel backpacks with the big North Face logo across the whole thing.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. There are, I think, Puma, Adidas, things like that. There are these really, big brands that sell things for money, and more money than one should potentially pay for these things, and
expensive.
Yeah. Okay. And they're kind of like, I don't know, it's like a status symbol. But I think there's almost like a sense of, I don't know. I think like there's one question of like how much of it is real, like how much of that is bootleg from Naples. So there's already somebody wearing, what looks like it could be a $700 t-shirt might be a $50 knockoff from Naples.
I think there's also, in many cases, even if you have a $300 backpack or one really nice, warm jacket, I think a lot of people know that doesn't necessarily mean you're carrying a lot of cash on you, or that you even have a lot of cash. There are many, money poor travelers who have good gear because they stocked up beforehand or got it secondhand or things like that. So I think it's pretty well known now that even if you have one big, even if it's a flashy piece like the streetwear backpack, it doesn't mean that people are going to be able to get money off of you.
And I think tying into that, it used to be, again, I'm going back to like the 90s, maybe even early 2000s, when you went traveling, you would have a camera, you'd have the backpack, you'd have cash, you'd have traveler's checks, you'd have maybe a checkbook or a debit card, you'd have maybe, I don't know. There's like different things. Like you'd have some expensive things, some not so expensive. So when you were going to be robbed or pickpocketed, there were things that someone could take and sell quickly for cash. Today, for lack of a better example, like a camera is not as common today simply because a phone is a pretty good camera. And a lot of times phones, I know like iPhones, are basically useless without the password. They're essentially bricked and you have to, there's all these sort of like, what you can do to get around it. But 9 times out of 10, when a phone is iCloud locked, there's nothing to do except break it down for parts. So they're not worth that much money secondhand. And sometimes like you'll even see this on like eBay and stuff. You'll see like, an iPhone 15 or whatever, a brand new iPhone, and it's like $50 because it's iCloud locked, and it's like it's really only worth the parts. Like you can't use it as a phone. Mm-hmm. So I think there's almost a natural safety built into the fact that today you don't travel with that much cash around. You don't bring a camera. You don't bring traveler's checks. You don't bring things that are easily translated into local currency, if that makes sense.
Can I sprinkle in a tip here, though?
Well, let's see. This is where those rainbow sprinkles come in.
The very first rainbow sprinkle. So I don't think anybody's going to steal my phone because of what you said. They're locked, essentially, becomes a brick. But I do still hold it. Like I hold my phone differently when I'm in a small town where we live here, and when I'm in a big city. If I'm looking at Google Maps or something like that, that's the most common thing I'm going to have open and my phone out. I do the like city hold, where I hold it with my index finger at the top of the phone and hold it close to my chest. So it's much more difficult for someone to grab. If I'm just holding it almost like a playing card or something, like very gingerly at the bottom of the phone, it's easier to snatch. So I do the city hold, kind of grab it with my whole hand. And for cameras, I will sometimes take around our camera, but I so often see people in big cities, and I don't mean to call people out. I feel like maybe it's just, I just noticed this. It's people with Leicas, with like very expensive cameras, who hold them just with one hand, no strap around their wrist or their neck. And I have never seen one get snatched. But my brain, I would never snatch a camera, but my brain goes, I could totally grab that camera and run away.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. That would be so easy.
This is Darcy's thief life, by the way, y'all.
I've actually never stolen anything. Now that I'm thinking about it.
That's what makes you difficult to relate to the masses. Because the masses, I think, have stolen something in their life.
Like, I feel like a lot of people have stolen a pack of gum or something. I've never stolen anything.
Well, I think some people also consider, like, stealing something from work as theft. Like, going home with, like, maybe some paper clips, or going home with something like that. Not necessarily stealing, like, money from work.
I don't know that I've done that.
Really?
I would eat goldfish whenever I worked at a preschool. But
and there we have it. That's theft.
That was encouraged.
Okay, so that's not theft.
So those are my 2 sprinkle tips. Hold your phone with the city hold, kind of grab it with your whole hand, put a finger on the top when you're holding it out, looking at something on your phone. And don't hold your camera with one hand. Put that strap on. Hold it tight.
Those are both good. And I mean, jumping in then to the idea of pickpocketing, and it's going to be a little bit formless because there's not really an easy way to run down a lot of this, but starting kind of, I guess, at the top is pickpocketing is more common in Italy than armed robbery of any kind. So I think you hear stories of like maybe people being held up, and I say that like in England it seems like, I don't know, people are like, knife crime is big in England and everyone was going to hold you up for your wallet in England, and I'm like, okay, that's a thing. But also we're from America, where it's a lot more likely to happen with a gun. So it's almost nice in Italy that they pickpocket you. It's like there's a sense that like you're somehow a safer crime. And no, I think the general consensus is in Italy, by and large, a lot of the sort of theft, theft is going to be pickpocketing. Mm-hmm. It's going to be somewhat organized, not necessarily, there's not going to be 3 people distracting you while somebody, picks your pockets, but it's going to be teams of people, because just tends to be easier when it's a group of people, especially if one person gets caught, they can potentially get away with the other stuff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's I think looking at it like from an overview, there is crime for sure in Italy. And I think people do often hear about like, I've heard there's crime, but it's not nearly as bad as like, I think Barcelona has a worse pickpocketing rate than Rome, for example. New York has more crime than Rome. But again, that's a little difficult because it's a bigger city, and New York City is a huge place. So it's kind of hard to, if you're going to get robbed in the financial district, it's a lot more likely that somebody just stole your 401k or your retirement fund than, mugged you on the street kind of thing. So it's hard to there's no apples to apples comparison when it, I think, comes to the States. But I think you and I in the States have experienced a lot more violent crime. Like we've been mugged at gunpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And in Italy, we've not been mugged. We've not been pickpocketed, and no one has a gun. So it's a lot like, oh, this is really nice and safe. So, pickpocketing in general is going to be also a bit impersonal, if that makes sense. Like in the sense of that you're not personally targeted. It's just, as you mentioned, if you're holding your camera sort of loosely, gently, not around the strap, or you have it on the table and you're not near the table, like you're looking at a menu, it's not about you. It's about the fact that it's much easier to take something from a person.
For example, obviously, if you're sitting outside, which a lot of people do on vacations, there's lovely places to sit outside and eat at a restaurant. I would highly suggest you don't have your phone or your camera on the street, the sidewalk side, out on the table. But that's just a tip for anywhere. I wouldn't do that in Savannah.
Oh, God,
I wouldn't have anything because some people might just snatch it,
And not even I think in Savannah something, I would even consider anybody criminally minded snatching it. It's just some
crime of opportunity.
15-year-old kid walking by with their parents even who are just like, oh, that's a phone, and not then be like, that's their first theft. It's just, but as you mentioned, don't make yourself an easy mark, which is a kind of victim blaming thing, but it's also I think it's the idea that one of the facts of life is there is crime, and until there is no crime, the most you could do is sort of lessen your exposure to it by not making yourself the easiest target in your surrounding area. And there's a lot of ways to do this. Some of the ways, for instance, I should preempt this. Darcy and I, as I've mentioned, have never been pickpocketed or robbed in Italy. So I like to chalk that up more to luck than anything else.
Yes.
We've met other Italians who have been pickpocketed before. It's just, it seems kind of like it's not I don't know. It's not that's going to happen, not an inevitability, but it's just simply that
statistically, if we're in big cities enough, we probably will get pickpocketed at some point. But I think, like you're saying, it's half of it is preparing and trying to stay on your guard and do all the things that prevent you from being pickpocketed, and then the other half is just luck.
Yeah. So I think looking through what you can do, and some of that's very basic. Just starting off, if you wear a purse, having a slash-proof purse is a pretty good way to go ahead and start being safe. A slash-proof purse is just basically a purse with some kind of metal netting layered between the fabric, or some kind of fabric that is resistant to slash. So sort of like a slash vest. They make purses and bags with similar material. It's not the most fashionable or chic-looking thing in the world. It's not unfashionable or unchic. It just looks, slightly metallic and strange. And it's not maybe 100% what everyone wants to be carrying around. It's also not like when I was in China, for instance, a big common fear among the town, not the town, but I was told by a lot of people in the town that it's common for thieves to use really sharp razor blades and slice the bottom of your purse or your bag. I would always have this little shoulder bag, like this messenger bag. And they mentioned don't ever have your wallet or anything, because they can easily just slice the bottom, stuff falls out, and they grab it, or they just slice a corner and just take what they can, kind of thing. So that's the whole point of the slash
with a regular bag, or with a regular bag, not
just in a regular, exactly. Okay. So that was why, in the slash proof purse, I think sometimes people hear it and they're like, somebody can come up with a knife. It's no, it's just
they're
sometimes
just trying to
with a razor
bag,
blade,
to get your stuff,
And I think there's a common things, or wear the bag on the front. This is more important for a backpack, or if you wear a fanny pack / hip pouch, wear those on the front of your waist. But we often recommend on your, if you're going to wear a fanny pack, use it as a crossbody bag on your chest and have the pouch as close as possible to your chest. That way, ideally, no one can open the zippers without you knowing.
Plus, with that, we always, whichever of us is holding it, if we're in a crowd, we hold on to it, because someone could snip the back strap and then it falls off. And if you're in a crowd, it's going to fall on the ground. They can grab it. So if you're holding on to it and if someone slices it, they're still not going to get it.
Exactly. And so there's, other things, smaller things. One of the things we've started doing is you never carry more than you need to. This is kind of broad, but in Italy specifically, if you're not an EU citizen, you need to have a valid form of ID on you at all times. For Americans, for, I imagine, English, for Canadians, for pretty much anyone that's not, I think everyone, it's a passport. For an so again, for our American audience, in America, a driver's license is a valid form of ID. A driver's license is a worthless piece of paper in Europe. I mean, in Italy, unless you're driving, in which case they kind of care about it. So when you're walking around like Termini Station, for instance, Rome's major train station, there is a chance you'll be stopped by the police and they'll ask for your documents, and they'll just to make sure you're not on a watch list, to make sure you're not using stolen documents, to make sure one of 100 things that could happen, I guess. So we've been stopped, I think, once or twice. It's very
really?
routine.
I don't remember that.
We got stopped once in Naples and I think once in Rome.
When we had our passports with us?
Mm-hmm. Oh. And it wasn't a bad, they just like, they continued chatting to themselves, and, they're just like, oh yeah, can we see them? Yep, that looks like you. Thank you guys so much. And they think they might run it through some sort of a scanner to make sure it's not on a stolen list, or to make sure it's not, I think there's something else they do. I don't know if it's a stolen thing or if it's just to check we have arrest warrants out for us or something. So you definitely have to travel with your passport. Some people can get by this with using photocopies of the passport. I haven't seen it on any like government website saying that's acceptable. However, anecdotally, a lot of people have said that they'll carry photocopies of their passport, and when they're stopped, they show the photocopies, and there's no problem. These police officers, Carabinieri, Guardia di Finanza, don't necessarily like going back to your hotel room with you to get your passport, so that they can, in theory, fine you. Again, that's quite rare. It's more often you get somebody who's very grumpy and then tells you in no uncertain terms you need to start carrying a passport. But the reason I mention this is because that becomes the number one thing that you can easily have stolen from you is your passport, especially if it's in a bag. So something you and I do, I think, is keep things as separate as possible. If I bring my passport, well, for me, it's my identity card because I'm Italian. But if you bring your passport, then, you're not going to bring your driver's license. You're not going to bring any cards you're not using, any credit cards you're not using that day, anything, I think. It's like, for us, we walk around like very basic, a form of identification, a payment form, a phone. That's it. And everything else, I think, stays because, again, the times I've lost a wallet or have gotten mugged and lost wallets, when you kind of lose a lot of those things, some of those are just irreplaceable, like notes from people or things you found, or, serendipitous things that, came into your life, so you stuck it in your wallet, or photographs of family that, you didn't think to make a copy of. So it's just, that was the one photograph you had. There isn't really a way to replace those things. And it's a real just kick to the gut when you lose them. So we've learned to just travel around with like the important 3 things. And it's, usually a phone, a payment form of some kind, and identity card. If you have a phone that you can pay with, I think a lot of the iPhones can. I think some of the Samsungs can, the Huawei's. I assume there's other, because I know there's like Samsung Pay, Apple Pay, Google Pay. So I think you can just tap your phone to pay. I think that's somewhat cheap, like safe, because you still need a facial scan to pay with that. You still need the passcode or something like that. So if somebody steals your phone, they don't necessarily have your payment method. I don't think they can access it in any way. So in theory, if you lose your phone, you still have the actual card. So it could be like, okay, not the end of the world. I lost a phone. And as I mentioned earlier, phones don't really seem to be like that desirable, especially non-iPhones. Like if you have like just a non-iPhone, it kind of just seems to be not worth taking. Like I don't think anyone, everyone's like, oh, the nice Huawei phone, great. That's useless. So it's really just like top of the line iPhones. But again, while it not, I'm just thinking like in America, Apple's much bigger than it is here. I think it's not as big a...
yeah, most people have a different kind of phone here.
Yeah, like a Samsung Android, I guess is what it's called.
Huawei.
I was thinking like the Android operating system. So it like could just be I don't know, a phone they got at the phone store for 48 cents and a monthly plan.
That's true. If people do have their phone or their wallet or anything stolen, what should they do?
That's a good question. The easiest and probably best thing you should do is go to the police station, the local one, the closest one, and file a police report. If you are going to try to make a claim for your insurance, almost in every single case, your insurance company will need a copy of the police report, the report that you got something stolen, to even start processing your claim if your phone is insured. And if you lost your passport, I'm about 95% sure that at least the American Embassy is going to ask you for a police report or some sort of proof that it was stolen. Because we've talked about this, I think, in previous episodes. It used to be a common thing to be like, oh, I lost my passport. I need a new one. Air quotes. Sorry. Yeah, you guys can't see that. Lost my passport. So it's to overstay the visa. So I think there's now, if it's stolen, they try to like track to make sure, especially to this, so they can cancel it, but also kind of put a flag on it to make sure it's not used like going into another country. They're like, oh, we saw you enter back home to America, and whatever.
Also going to Switzerland.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a little bit of a little protection there, but I think you have to go to the embassy with a police report, and then they'll issue you a temporary. I don't think I think it's a passport or a card or some sort of receipt, and then you can get home with that.
I think it's just an official receipt. So what you're saying is, if you lose like a phone or a wallet or anything, go to the police station, report that. If you lose your passport, go to the police station, and then go to the embassy with that report, so that they can give you some sort of official documentation for you to be able to get back home.
Straight up and down, though, there's almost a 0% chance you're getting your stuff back, unless maybe you have an iPhone or something like that. It has the Find My iPhone on, and you can go to the police station and say, look, see, it has a little dot. Can we go there? Can we pick up the phone? You might be able to get lucky with that, but I don't know how. I don't think I've ever heard of somebody saying, I've been pickpocketed, and then the police did everything they could to help me and find my stuff again. So it's unfortunately not very high up on the priority, because I think there's an assumption that as soon as your stuff is lost, it's being shipped off somewhere to be processed and to be turned into, I don't know, money. So
I have another sprinkle tip.
Ooh, hit it.
Actually, I just thought of this. So I think you and I are set up to do this, but I cannot explain the technology. So can you have Find My iPhone on for someone else? Like could I find your phone with my phone?
I think you can have Find My iPhone on, but you have to be on the same iCloud thing, unless there could be a Find Your Friends thing.
That was my question. I think there's something like Find My Friends. Is that a thing?
Could be.
So I know that this exists. I don't know what it's called exactly, but I know it exists. But I suggest that if you are a family or a couple, or especially if you're traveling as a group of friends, set yourself up with being able to find each other's phones. Because if one of you gets lost, you can find that person. Yeah. If heaven forbid someone is kidnapped or something, which I don't think is going to happen in Italy, but just be prepared. That can help you find them. Or if your phone gets lost or stolen, one of your friends can track your phone.
Kidnapping, not a big crime in Italy anymore.
No, definitely not.
Like there was a time when Naples was the kidnapping capital of the world. Those times have long passed.
What was that? There was that movie.
Yeah, it's called Man on Fire with Denzel Washington and Dakota Fanning. It was a book based in Naples, but when the movie came out, because it then had changed, I think I want to say Mexico City had become the kidnapping capital of the world, but both for the same reasons, like, gangs. So they changed the location to be, I think, Mexico City, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, I mean, there was definitely a time where not the safest in the world, Naples, and that was a very long time ago. Mm-hmm. Well, that was within my lifetime and Darcy's, but still.
I thought it was the 80s.
I think it was early 90s.
Okay.
Technically. So, yeah, we're not from don't worry, we're not. I don't know how
you're not going to get kidnapped.
Yes.
But that's just.
But have your Find My iPhone on to be safe.
Just for safety.
And in this note, very briefly, I think the last thing I wanted to touch on, and I might loop back with some of those little fun little magic sprinkles, but cash on hand. I did mention this briefly about nobody carries cash anymore, traveler's checks, and kind of related. So one, you probably should not have that much cash on you anyway. We've mentioned this before, and we're going to mention this again, especially in the South in Italy. Cash absolutely is king. And at the same time, queen. And at the same time, it's not the South, like apart from Naples and maybe like Sicily, which is not, it's sort of its own little stand apart thing. There's not a lot of crime. I mean, you mentioned some organized crime in like Sicilia, Calabria, the Ndrangheta. I can never remember. Ndrangheta. I can never remember how to pronounce it. But there's really quite like limited crime, because again, it's one of those insular areas where everybody knows each other. So there's a sort of, everybody knows what you're up to and what you're doing, and it kind of helps the lack of crime. So with that being said, carrying cash can absolutely be a bit of a, I would recommend not. If you're in like Rome, for instance, maximum 100 euros. And that might be for if you're going to a market, if you're going to go to, I don't know, like sometimes in a cab, it's not bad to use cash because there's a sense that like you don't, if basically the person's, I don't know, there's a lot of these accusations that cab drivers are overcharging. So if you're like, I have 50 euros for this fare, we're agreeing on 50, right? And then you get in the cab and they're like, actually it's 65. It's like, too bad we agreed on 50. That's all I have in cash. Here you go. Then I can see cash being useful in a cab. Like I mentioned, in market, in the sense of like there's some green markets and stuff where it's a lot easier to have cash because it's just, makes everybody happier. But I wouldn't do more than 100.
Well, yeah, we pay mostly in cash, just always. However, we do go to ATMs a lot. The trusted ATM. We don't go to the ATM and take out $700, €700 at a time and just carry that around with us. I think usually we'll get out max €100 at a time, or keep cash at the house and only carry, usually only up to like 50 bucks.
Exactly.
So is that what you're saying? Just don't carry massive amounts of cash.
And maybe like if you're staying at a hotel and you're not sure how much you trust the hotel, just don't have massive amounts of cash. Don't have an emergency fund.
Frequently, if you need to.
Unless, of course, I mean, there's times where this is different. I would definitely use your gut if you're on like the train or something. If you feel like, okay, I might need a little extra emergency fund, that makes sense. But by and large, in Italy, it's kind of like traveling in anywhere else where an emergency fund of cash isn't like that useful because everybody accepts card or Venmo or PayPal, so it's a little bit unnecessary. And the reason I mention that is, again, pickpocket. If you kind of limit the amount of things that you are advertising, if that makes sense, then it makes yourself as a less of a target. And on that note of cash is card skimmers, which is a kind of not an issue necessarily, but it's something people often ask about. They're like, I just went to Rome, I just went to Milan, I came back and I just saw a double charge on my card, and I don't imagine, I don't know how that could have happened, or I saw my card used from somewhere I didn't use. Sometimes ATMs not at banks are just going to be intrinsically not as safe as ATMs at banks. At banks, they're checked frequently. There's a lot of users. There are security cameras. It's usually through some sort of doors, in the sense of you're inside. Like, not always, but a lot of the ATMs tend to be inside.
In the foyer of the bank.
In the foyer of the bank. Foyer, if you would like to be French about it. So it's a little safer feeling, I think, at a bank versus, Termini Station, Termini Station. There's the Eurostar one.
Yeah,
and
we never use those.
God, no. Not only are they a huge scam, they're a scam in the sense that, like, they charge you just a rate, like a really, really...
It's a bonkers rate.
Yeah, to use it, like the flat rate to use it plus the conversion rate is like absolutely astronomical. So, your 200 euros my 200 euros might cost you $280 instead of $220. So we don't use those ATMs. We just use the ones in banks, and it tends to be that the Eurostar or there's a couple other brands that are essentially the private ATMs that tend to be in areas that are not frequently checked, those ATMs. I don't think there's a company that comes around and checks them. The owner doesn't come around and check them. So you never know if there's a card skimmer on it.
Basically unmonitored.
Exactly. So we definitely don't recommend using those. We definitely recommend going into a bank. And as we've mentioned in a couple other podcasts, if you have there are a couple different cards you can use. Charles Schwab is one of them. It's a bank account, bank company, bank. It's a bank.
Yeah.
And then there's Revolut. I think it's like kind of Revolution, but Revolut. That's more of an online type thing. You get a physical card, but it's definitely for like the modern traveler and the young people. And that's all their advertising is like young people and travelers. And it's supposed to be kind of similar in the sense of no ATM fees, no foreign transaction fees, et cetera, et cetera. But the reason we recommend those is because they will pay you back ATM fees, and they don't have any extra withdrawal fees or steeper foreign transaction fees. They use the international conversion rate. They don't use, because I think a lot of the ATMs use like blue something exchange rate, which is like a little higher, and you can tell because there's I think recently I pulled out like 200 euros, and using that exchange rate, it's like it'll be $236. But when I said use my bank's exchange rate, Charles Schwab, it was $222. So it's kind of like a $14 saving there for just simply letting Charles Schwab do the conversion. And that's one way to kind of, again, just keep things a little safer, I feel like, just taking out less cash and using a card that does not penalize you for taking out multiple, like, because I think that's the thing. When I first went traveling, I had to take out 500 or 600 euros at a time because my bank was like,
charging you way too much money
and
in
a flat rate
fees.
just for the thing. So I'm like, I don't want to charge €5 every time I take out like $40. That's going to rack up. I'll just take out 400 and make it easier. So I think that's the kind of the core of pickpocketing. That's the biggest thing you're going to run into. There are definitely some other things you can do to stay safe. I mentioned before very briefly, but metros tend to be a little bit less safe than buses simply because a lot of tourists find the metros are easier to use. Makes sense. They're more, they're labeled better. They're a lot easier to get on and off. There's no confusion. They explain the stops pretty well. It goes to where you need to go. However, they tend to be, because they're open metros in the sense of there's no separation between the cars, it's not uncommon for people to walk through. So you wouldn't necessarily know if somebody's walking through and, pickpocketing and then, going to the other end of the metro, but you would notice that in the bus because you'd be like, why did this person walk by me to the back of the bus when there's no space and there's no door? Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit like that. If you're on a metro, I definitely recommend getting on one of the two ends, the front or the back of the metro, not the middle. The middle tends to be packed with people, but the two ends tend to be pretty empty in a relative sense, relative to the rest of the metro. And again, stand with your back to the door on a metro. As you mentioned before, hold their bag, or if you have your stuff in your pockets, put your hands in your pockets. Don't put your cash in like the phone case. A lot of people like to put like extra cash in the phone case.
The people with their cash in the back of a clear phone case,
Never understand that.
Oh my goodness. And don't if you do keep your belongings in your pockets, keep them in your front pockets. Don't keep your phone or your wallet in your back pocket. That's just not very safe. And don't, this is not necessarily related to being on the subway, but don't count your cash out in the open.
Yeah.
That is just a number. That's a safety tip for your whole life.
I feel like that's something like your parents will always tell you, like, never carry. But of course, like, there's that classic, like, counting it when you're hunched over to, like, make sure the ATM
Which
gave
is
you
super obvious looking.
Gave you the money you asked for. So I think those are some really good, like, just very basic things. And they're classic things. It's genuinely, too, like, it's funny because in Italy, people often say that they take really extreme measures when they're going to the States because, just on a per capita basis, there's a lot more crime in the States than there is in Italy. So people will take their wedding rings off when going to the States because here, having gaudy wedding rings is a lot more common, under a certain age population. Like I feel like women in their 80s tend to have just very simple gold bands, and men in their 80s.
But women in their 80s in the South wear their gold.
That's the thing.
Necklaces and earrings and bracelets and rings. They are decked out, some of them.
And people will say, like, going to the States, it's the same thing. They're like, I'm not wearing anything fancy. I'm not wearing any of my gold, any of my jewelry. I'm not carrying my nice stuff. I'm leaving it all at home. It's funny to me, like, as the sort of American and then now living in Italy, where we're always kind of told, like, Italy can be kind of dangerous. Like, don't walk around at night and don't carry this and don't look, wealthy. And then Italians have said the same thing, except, again, on a sort of apple to apple basis. Here, no one's really going to rob you. People might, for sure. Please don't take this as like you're never going to get robbed. There's always a chance of getting robbed. And in Italy, it is such a minute percentage versus somewhere like the States, where I feel like pickpocketing, not as common, but like just straight up
just getting mugged
is very common, especially in like touristy areas and things like that, where it's like, you're not going to stick around to try to find the person. You're going to leave the next couple of days. So it's, it's a less risk environment. And this brings us this really happy episode is going to be really lovely. But this brings us to the next point of topic, I guess, which are scams. Do you want to start this one? Should I start this one?
You start. What's a scam?
Well, there's not many. I should go ahead and start that. And I say that because I think there's this understanding on forums is where mainly I get a lot of my information, because I spend time like answering people and trying to help out, like, make people have a safe trip or help people have a safe trip. And a lot of people want to know what are some common scams. And even it's funny, like when I went to New York City, like 10 or 11 years ago, maybe, I remember one of my uncles telling me, he's like, there's a new scam that everyone's been doing and you have to be careful, but it's somebody will bump into you and they'll drop a pair of broken glasses and they'll start screaming that you basically hit them and then stepped on their glasses.
What?
Yeah, so he's like, you owe me like $200. He's like, $200 pair of glasses, you owe me. And it doesn't matter, like, if you're just like, I don't have anything, like, oh, you gotta owe me this money, go donate, you owe me money. And he's like, and they'll, basically wait, and even if they just make $50 off you, they make $50, and it's like, that's a good scam. They'll pick the glasses and, do it again. So he's like, if somebody bumps you and like drops glasses, just walk away. He's like, just don't even take your time. And at the same time, that's not very common in Italy.
I've never seen that happen.
Yeah. Well, like any scams really aren't that common in Italy. And I think but I just want to kind of bring this in the topic, because I think one of the biggest I don't know, fears. One of the biggest question marks have always been around the sort of I don't know what they would be like. We would call them like it's the people who sell bracelets, or they sell little toys, or they sell bags, or they sell
Like street merchants without a table.
yeah, street merchants without a table, basically.
People carrying things around and selling them.
Yeah, like belts. And a lot of people, there's a kind of a, I would like to say misunderstanding that these are scammers. And I say misunderstanding because in my mind, a scam is when you don't understand it's happening. You don't know you've been scammed until you've lost your money. But this is more, I think, social engineering to be really.
It's a hustle.
It's a hustle. And I think there's a lot of times, especially around like in Rome, like the Castel Sant'Angelo, there's a lot of people selling bracelets, but even around like Trevi Fountain or something like that. And it's not really a scam. I mean, actually a good example are people selling roses in and around the Piazza del Popolo. And a lot of what it boils down to is people, like these sellers will target typically a group, because a group works better than a single person. A group has peer pressure, and they'll try to entice one of the group members to buy something from them. And this usually happens in a few different ways. I know that it's with men typically. Like, there'll be a lot of like African guys essentially who will find like somebody in the group. And the classic thing that I think like literally every guy has experienced in Rome will be called, somebody will come over. It's like, oh, you're from Africa. You're my African brother. Like, here, have this bracelet. It's a sign of friendship. And it's basically ends up being like, and as you're kind of walking around, you're like, thanks, man. It's like, hey, but maybe you can give me like €1 or 2 for the bracelet. Maybe you can just like help me out here. And it typically ends up with, the person giving money because they want to be nice. They feel bad, et cetera, et cetera. They feel like, we're friends now. And so it's not, again, a scam. It's just, as you mentioned, a hustle. But you don't tend to get those. Like, nobody has ever come up to you and said, my African sister.
No. What they always do to you, they're like, yo, look, we have the same skin color, which
we do not, to be very clear. If you can, I'm not pale, but I'm pale adjacent.
No, but guys have, these people who sell the bracelets have often, like, they toss the bracelet to me, but I've gotten, and all of them are so nice. They're like they're very, very nice people, and like chit chat, and often they'll start up a conversation. And I mean, I'm sure they're nice people in general, and it's a part of the hustle. They're trying to make you feel like you're, your best friends now. But I've gotten to the place where we chit chat, have a nice time. I learn his name, whether it's real or not. I toss the bracelet back and say, I'm so sorry. No, thank you. And there have been times where we go back and forth tossing this bracelet from farther and farther away, And I'm not good at tossing or catching. So it's kind of awkward, but it is what it is. I just toss the bracelet back.
Jump in though on that. If that happens to you, again, dear listener, if you're out walking and something like that, and somebody says, hey, here's a little gift, have this, and they toss a bracelet to you, you can absolutely just step aside. And be like,
you don't have to
no,
catch it. Yeah.
Thanks though, I'm good. Because it's almost like, again, this is more. I say this too because if you've been in Italy for a week or two and you're just getting tired of this happening, if you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to walk, just want to walk. I just want to take a picture of the sunset, blah 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 blah. Because we've seen sometimes people get angry and people start yelling, and that's like not a great way to handle it.
No.
It's kind of, as you mentioned, I think hustles. It's kind of a game basically. It's part of the game, and I think people kind of there's a feeling like, oh, this is just recently. It's not recently. I was traveling. I think, what is it? We were in 2024. When I first traveled in 2013, it wasn't like bracelet sellers, but there was another hustle. There's always been some hustle. There's always been some sort of like, we'll be like, again, social engineering, like make somebody feel good, give them this little gift and say, hey, if you have $1 or 2, I want to go buy myself a coffee. I want to get myself a Red Bull, something like that. And it's not, again, a scam. It's just a bit of flirtatious engineering, if you will, to whoever it is. And I think, but even the rose sellers.
I've gotten grumpy with one of the rose sellers. I will say it's hard with anybody who's hustling this way because I don't know their life and I don't have to sell bracelets. Maybe they chose to, maybe that's the only thing they can do. Maybe they're a really good salesman. I have no idea. So I try to not be judgmental and just go with the flow, treat it like a game. I don't want to buy anything. I'm so sorry. Especially because I don't have any money, and that's not just something I say. We don't have a lot of money. No, but the rose sellers, I got really grumpy with a guy once because he shoved the rose into my hand, and it was quite sharp, and it scratched my hand, and it had been several days in a row that we'd been in this area, and things like that kept happening with the same group of guys who were selling the roses every day. And I only had limited Italian. Plus, when I get angry, my Italian falls away. And I was like, I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I was trying in Italian. I was like, this is a gift. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much. And walking away. And then he comes walking after me and like, no, 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 you have to pay me. And I started yelling at him. I'm like, if it's not a gift, don't shove it in someone's hand.
Yeah, it was good. I think somebody actually some woman that was near us
Yeah.
kind of laughed, like not laughing at us, but it was kind of just like, oh my God, I feel that. But, and I think that's a good, I mean, again, the sort of nobody ever wants to lose their cool in a situation. And it's the classic, yes, don't put something in somebody else's hand if it's not a gift. Just, goodbye.
Yeah. I tried to start with empathy, and then that one time I just bubbled over because I got injured, and I was slightly injured more. It was frustrating that he was aggressive, so.
And on that note, I think the best way that we've seen and that we've found is if somebody's like, I mean, if you're at a restaurant and, cause it's quite allowed by and large for people to come in and sell roses. We've never seen like waiters or managers or anything come out and say, no, you can't do that here. So I assume it's part of the culture or it's allowed. And again, when I came here 10 years ago, and then when we came here 8 years ago, we saw it. So it's been at least 8 years it's been happening. So it seems kind of part of the culture where people will just come in and sell roses, and past the initial like, no, thank you, but no, thank you, you can kind of just start to ignore the person, because I've noticed that when you continue to engage, they just sort of people just don't leave.
Mm-hmm. It's a selling tactic.
It's a selling tactic, and it sounds like super cold. I realize, it's just more of a, I don't know, it's almost like a way to protect yourself. It's just sort of like, no, thank you, and then just kind of go back to talking. And we've noticed too, like they'll sit there for another like 30 seconds and just go with like holding out the roses like in the middle of the table. Yeah. And you're just like, no, thanks though.
My favorite is when they'll hold out the roses and then stare off into space.
Yeah, and just like maybe they'll just take one and we can make some money here. So there's a little, and again, these aren't, I want to put these into scams, but just because, to make clear, they're not scams. There isn't like a, you fish out your wallet to pay them €1 for something, and now that they know you have a wallet. It's like, that's not part of it at all. It's just,
they're just trying to sell their stuff.
A 15-cent bracelet for €1 or $2, essentially. Mm-hmm. That being said, though, I just wanted to really briefly touch on, if you do see somebody walking around with baskets or belts or socks, that's a really big one. Yeah, it's a huge one. People walk around with
lighters.
Socks. Lighters and tissues are another one. I think there's a few other things we've seen, but those are not scams at all. That's just people straight up just selling things. It used to be bigger. It's not so much anymore, but when you get on a train, there used to be people, and still I guess are, that will get on with like a cooler full of drinks and then like a cooler full of sandwiches, and they'll just kind of go up and down, like selling sandwiches, drinks, coffee, that kind of stuff. I think we got on a bus once, and then just before the bus took off, some guy got on with a basket of drinks and snacks, and it was like, do you guys need drinks, snacks, and then got off again. So again, I bring these up because these aren't scams. These are just, I think like as an American, I'm immediately unaware when I'm like, whoa, what are you doing? Like, is this, like you're selling food on a train? Like, what is this? And it's kind of like one of those, I don't know, those hearkening back to the travels of yesteryear where, there's a book and I can't remember the title. I think it's Following the Eastern Star, Writing the Eastern something. It's I think it's Paul Thoreau. I could be butchering all of this, but it's a famous travel writer. I think it's Thoreau, but he was talking about like being in Hungary, and it's like 2 a.m, 3 a.m. when the train pulls into a station, and there's all these sausage and sausage sandwich sellers basically, and you basically like shove your money through the cracks in the window, and they're shoving the sandwich back through.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a crack. I guess it's like a 2 or 3 inch gap in the window. But they're running along the train, like putting the sandwich in and taking the cash. So it kind of feels like that, but just updated a little bit. Mm-hmm. As we mentioned in the train episode, a lot of the trains have a food cart. They have a bar on board, so it's not as common. But the regional trains, we've seen this. The intercity trains, we've seen this. And then the buses, which have no food, we've seen people just jump on board and then try to sell it and then hop off again. So that's just briefly on scams. Those are probably the most common. And again, it's just to be clear, it's more social engineering. If you're in a group, a lot of the sellers, the bracelet sellers, the rose sellers will typically try to go for peer pressure, try to get, I've noticed too, if it's like a group of men, they try to get like one of the men to like not bow down to the peer pressure, but certainly be like, come on, man, we're friends now. What are you being? And it's like, all right. And they get the €5, whatever it is. So it's, if you're in a family or something like that, I think we've seen typically like they'll go for the dad in the group or something.
That's the other thing that got me about the rose sellers is they would always try to go to you first to get you
Yes.
to buy me a rose.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, what if I want to buy him a rose?
Right.
Okay. We're not going for the misogyny here. Okay. I could just as well buy him one.
Yes, exactly. Thank
So
you.
That also made me grumpy.
Yeah. There's a lot of that sort of like, excuse me, we have different gender roles, so please, she would like to buy me a rose. That happens a lot though in certain areas around Rome, around any Florence, anything like that. It's going to happen. So again, these aren't. I just wanted to briefly bring these up. These are not scams. These are just going to happen, and they're sellers.
Yeah.
The only scam you might run into, and I say scam in the largest possible air quotes.
Air quotes. You're doing like Nixon peace signs.
Really, really big air quotes. Are, as I mentioned briefly, the taxi drivers. There has been some flack. Taxi drivers have caught some flack basically for not charging by the meter. They'll charge a randomly generated amount that they just came up with, and a big way to sort of just get around that is just tell them to use the meter, or and there are like I think in Rome and in Florence and in Milan, there's an app called Taxi Now. There's a few other apps like that. You can order a taxi. It'll tell you how much it costs roughly, and in that app will tell you like the name of the taxi number, this, that, the other thing. So if there is a issue, you can absolutely super easily complain.
That's a good safety tip as well.
Well, I was going to say I found in Naples too, because Naples used to have more of a problem than they do now with illegal taxis. So people just in white cars with fake taxi things like, say, oh, of course I'll do it. Oh, my meter's not working. So one thing I found is that when you get like a hotel orders you taxi, they're very clear. Like you have taxi number 48, 48, okay, on the side, it'll be 48. Look for 48 and then get in the 48. So I was like, okay, 48, where's this taxi? And so they're very specific. Like, they don't get in a different taxi. If a taxi pulls up and says, I'm the taxi you're waiting for. No. Make sure it says 48 on it. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff, which I really appreciate. Just that sort of, there are people there to help out and make sure it doesn't, go totally off the rails. And I think that's the last thing on scams.
Yeah.
Scams are small. Maybe like the only other things, sorry, top of mind really quickly, restaurant scams. Sometimes they'll get you to try to pay by cash, not by card. That's them trying to scam like the tax system, the government. That's not really them trying to scam you.
Yeah.
When people don't give you a receipt, again, that's them trying to scam the government, not necessarily you. Like there's been times we don't get a receipt, and that's just this person trying to make it a above the table sort of purchase. They're trying to make it an under the table purchase. So if they give you a receipt, it creates a paper trail, and then they might get in trouble. It's
it's not related.
No.
I just had a thought.
Yeah.
One other thing, it's not a scam. It's just that there are sellers in big cities who will sell like knockoff handbags and stuff.
Sure.
Not a scam.
They don't give receipts either.
They don't give receipts, and it's not Chanel, but that's fine.
But they look like Chanel, and that's what's important. It's also kind of cute because it's like as soon as like, I don't understand how illegal it is though. I'm so curious because cops will walk by and there's no issue. So I'm like, it's clearly like, and I say cops will walk by and there's no issue because there's a question of, there's always the question of like, do you need a license to be a busker? Do you need a license to do a performance? Do you need a license for anything like that, to sell things, to walk around? Sometimes, especially in the winter, chestnut sellers are really big, especially in Naples. Every other street corner has somebody with an open fire and chestnuts.
Roasting chestnuts.
Yeah. And I think in Rome it's a little less big, but still a thing. So I'm always kind of curious what kind of, validation they need. But then every once in a while, there'll be like a signal, and all of a sudden, because all these bags are like on a sheet, and they'll just like, whoosh, and all of a sudden it's this one giant
The sheet
sack
turns into a sack, exactly.
Yeah, and they just carry off the bags. And I'm like, is there a different person coming by?
Yeah, is it like you don't like the Guardia di Finanza, but the police are fine?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
So that is, those are not scams either. Those are just, again, fake bags, but at 20 euros for a bag. So it's not like, you're definitely not getting real, but also, it's a fun souvenir. And I think those are pretty much the big things for scams.
Yeah.
So very briefly, even more briefly than that, is just auto theft, auto-related theft. And I really just wanted to mention this because there seems to be this idea that like, if you rent a car in Italy, it's going to get stolen. It's going to get broken into. You're going to be robbed. You're going to lose all your stuff.
People are going to slash your tires.
Maybe, for sure, maybe. Like I don't know. It seems like a 60-40 kind of thing. Like sometimes I think people are crazy. I'm like, no, that's never happened. But then it seems like almost everybody we've met, even the person we house sat for in Rome, he even mentioned like they drove a car up to Pisa. They went out of the car, went to look at the tower, came back, and then all the stuff was missing out of the car. So it's a little bit of a like, okay, there could definitely be some theft for sure. There's been I think again on maybe it was Rick Steves or Forbes, or not Forbes, Photos, or maybe it was Reddit, and somebody mentioned that someone had basically robbed their caravan. They took a caravan around Italy, and
Oh, wow.
they got back, and it had been.
That's
but,
like all their stuff.
well, no, the thing is, somebody I should not use the word robbed. Somebody broke into, but left the laptop, left the iPad.
What?
And then they were trying to look for like what was stolen, and they couldn't find anything stolen. So they were like, and so people were thinking,
Oh, that's unsettling.
well, and people were like, maybe like you left it unlocked, and somebody thought it was theirs.
Oh, yes.
And just came in, and then was just
Was anything like rifled through?
not, it was like things were moved, but nothing was rifled, or it looked like it wasn't like clothes everywhere and
Right.
this and that. So
Someone came in and made themselves a cup of coffee and then realized that wasn't their cup of
yeah,
coffee.
and I'm kind of wondering because I've done it in the past where I've gone into a hotel room that wasn't mine, but it took me a while to notice that it wasn't mine, and then I'm just like, oh, this is looking really weird, and then I'm like, I should go find everybody else to see where they are, because this is something's uncanny about this hotel room all of a sudden.
That's unsettling.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
and I mentioned that because the two biggest areas to be concerned, in my opinion, are going to be around Naples and Sicily, and that is because straight up, that is just typically where car thefts and car break-ins tend to happen. I know that when we first got here in 2015, we were looking at renting a car, and they were very strict. Like, you cannot bring this car into and around Naples. You will lose things. Even if it's just like they'll take the little antenna off the top. And
Yeah.
they're like, no, you will lose things. So they were very big on if you're going to Naples, this insurance is void. Like, because it's also, I'm going to say, like, the only time we've ever gotten car insurance through the rental company has been Italy, because the one time we used our credit card insurance, they covered the damages again, air quotes, because it was like the scratch that was not ours, but like silly little gooses, we didn't do the classic thing of going around the car and taking photos because we were in a rush. Every other time we took photos. This time, like, we're in a rush, we have to get back, blah blah blah, let's just take the car. It was a dinged up little car, but we were like, it's the last one in the lot kind of thing, or the last automatic in the lot, I should say. And we're like, it's fine, it's just whatever. She circled a bunch of the stuff on it, and I was like, that's fine, let's just let's go. And then when we went to drop the car off, he was like, well, this is you, and this is you, and this is you, and that's you. And I'm like, okay, none of this is us.
Yeah, that was a horrible experience.
Yeah, I think we argued him down to like one of the dings, and he's like, well, this isn't thing. And I'm like, oh my God, and he's like, well, you have coverage. But it was one of those things that, like, again, kind of talking about a scam. Once he found out that we had credit card coverage, he was just like, no, it's fine, they'll pay for it. So like, no, just, there's a couple things. And I'm like,
It's like he worked on commission or something,
That was how it
and
felt.
he was going to personally make money off of us getting charged for these scratches and dings that were not created by us.
yeah. And honestly, I think in the States, the credit card coverage is probably fine on a rental car, but in Italy, they covered the purchase. No, excuse me, they covered the actual damage, but because you have to pay taxes, just, I guess, like, you have to pay $300 for the damage, plus there's a 22% VAT on top of that. So I think we had to pay like $500 something for the damages plus some sort of tax. So it was like $100 and some odd dollars we didn't get back, because they're like, well, that was a tax and we can't reimburse the tax. So it felt a little bit like we should have just gotten the
Insurance through the car rental agency.
Exactly, because then
Yeah.
it's like, give us the full insurance and then it's fine. Like, the car's totaled, whatever. And so that's something I do recommend. I definitely recommend getting the insurance through the car rental company rather than through your credit card. But there's not really, basically, I mean, if you're driving around Tuscany, if you're driving around the north, there shouldn't be a problem. If you're driving around Sicily, I doubt there's going to be a problem. Lock the doors. Don't make anything visible. Do that kind of classic thing, like of keeping everything sort of hidden, like keeping all the nice things hidden. And yeah, just kind of do the same things you do at home. Just don't leave, your phone on the dashboard. Don't leave cash in the back seat. Just, kind of be smart. If you're going to leave a bunch of bags in the back seat, or in the trunk, it might look a little bit more appealing than.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just regular. If you leave your own car anywhere in your hometown, I feel like you put your valuables away and make it look like there's nothing worth stealing. Same thing here.
Yeah. And I think that's everything with a car. Just, again, street smart, like car smarts, I should say. If you're, and then, renting a car, just be smart about it. Just park in safe areas, park under street lights, park in places with cameras. If you're feeling like really, conscientious about it, get the insurance so it's not your fault, and have a really relaxing trip, and don't worry about the car too much. And then very briefly, did you want to mention anything on traveling as a woman?
Yeah, I don't want to make it. I don't want to say I'm making it too brief just because it is important notes. But I will make it quick. So I'm a woman, and I'm pretty clearly a woman, and I'm short, and so I'm always on the offensive, whatever it is.
Defensive, I think.
Defensive. I'm always on alert when I'm traveling around and walking around by myself, especially in big cities or in areas where that I haven't been before. I don't do that much solo traveling, but I have walked around big cities by myself. So I was in Rome recently by myself and walking around at night and things like that. So that's a good example of me just using regular street smarts. I lived in New York for a time, so I think that prepared me. I mean, I've walked around downtown Savannah by myself. It's all the same stuff. Whatever bag I have, I'm holding on to it, and I'm holding it in front of me for sure if I'm in a crowd, because as a short female person, I feel like I look like an easy target. So I hold on to my stuff, keep it in front of me. I might be a little overly cautious in that I try to clock faces.
Yeah, like a spy.
Like a spy. Especially at night, and especially if I'm on a street that doesn't have that many people. I just try to keep a general idea of who is around me. If I get a weird sense, like trust your instincts, trust your gut. If you feel weird, if you feel uneasy, if you feel like perhaps there's somebody following you or being skeevy, pop into a shop and let them pass. Go near a family, find a more crowded area. Absolutely trust your gut. If it turns out to be nothing, it's fine. You were safe, and maybe you felt silly, but it's worth it to be safe.
I think, if I may also just jump in on that, if you're American especially, because America is not what I would consider a very physical country. There's a lot of personal space in America. I mean, maybe not in New York City, but in like Savannah or in, I don't know. I mean, other city. I've been to other cities, like I've been to LA and I've been to New York City, and that's pretty much it. I've really not explored America, y'all. I've lived there for 20 something years, and I never left Savannah apparently. But I'm thinking like Charleston or Jacksonville or whatever it is. When you're just out and about and traveling and walking around historic areas, as Americans, I think we're used to a level of personal space. Like if somebody's too close to you on the sidewalk or in a grocery store, it's like, oh, this is weird. Like give me another foot, please. Yeah. In Italy, there really isn't that same level of personal space, to the point of sometimes there's zero personal space. Like people just don't.
Even if there's room around you, sometimes people will be just really close.
Yeah, and we've mentioned too before, like we'll be in line at the grocery store and we'll give the person in front of us like a foot of space, and someone else, like Italian, will just think that we're waiting for something else to happen. So they'll cut in front of us, thinking that we're not actually in line, because like, well, of course you're not in line. You're quite far away from the line. Like that's not line. That's far away. There's been a lot of places where it is quite just like just tummy to back, if you will. Yeah. And I only mention that too because, especially as a guy, I know that like sometimes I'll see these posts about like, I'm a man, I'm traveling, and I don't know, I'm giving people a guy voice. I have a guy voice, but I'm saying I'm a man, I'm traveling in Italy, and a lot of men like touching me. What's that about? And it's because Italy's just a very physical country. Place, yeah. So it's not uncommon, like if you've met somebody more than once, for them to hold your shoulder or to hold your leg. Like I've had conversations with people and we're just like, someone's holding my thigh or someone's holding my hand. You got a
hearty thigh slap the other day from one of our guy friends. Yeah, it was very cute.
It's like he walks by, he's like, good to see you, and he just like reaches down and like pats my thigh, like we're walking. Or like they'll stop and kind of give you a little shoulder squeeze. Winks go a long way here. Everyone winks at each other, or men I should say wink at each other.
It's often it's hard to when you're talking about like the non-binariness of people's genders, but if you're going strictly on like traditional roles, a lot of guys will touch guys like on the shoulder, grab hands, grab arms, like the thigh grab slap you got the other day. It was friendly. A lot of women to other women, women presenting people to women presenting people, will hold each other's hands, grab each other's arms, walk arm in arm. Men will walk arm in arm with each other. It usually won't go crossways. So like our guy friends don't touch me the same way they touch you.
Yeah, like they'll hold to like your shoulder sometimes. Yeah. It's very brotherly. It's not very...
It is. And it's not... They don't, like, for you, they'll kind of like come up to you, grab both your shoulders, shake you around, give you a hug. For me, it's very much here is a respectful shoulder touch, you know? But women will grab my shoulders, grab my waist, grab my arms in a very loving way. And they would stop if I asked them to be clear. But that is just the norm. I will say though, there was a time on the bus here. We were in Rome, and I happened to be with you, but we were sitting, and I was on the outside seat on the aisle, and there was a guy who, I don't think he was trying to be creepy, but it went, okay, so I was sitting, and he put inched closer and closer with the front of his body. And then at a certain point, he was touching my arm with the front lower half of his body. And I'm like, no, it's fine. But up until a point, I was like, this is now my breaking point. And I moved and started to say something, and he abruptly moved away, far away. So that's one of those times that, I firmly say, trust your instinct. If you feel uncomfortable, move, say something, make sure that you are safe, before you are nervous about, being rude socially. Trust your instincts.
I was gonna say, it's definitely one of our things we've often repeated to, well, at least just to people asking us for travel advice, is it's better to be rude and to misread a situation and be rude than to try to not misread a situation and end up in a worse, in a place that you're very uncomfortable. If that makes sense.
Definitely.
It's like, it's better just to be rude than be assaulted, or rude than be anything like that. So, like, I don't know, you mentioned being defensive, and I think sometimes it's like you have to be a bit prickly sometimes, because it's hard to understand like what everybody's thinking all at once. And if people just, because I think, again, buses, especially in Rome, are just classic places where like people just touch, because it's like there's not a lot of space. So it's really common for like somebody to sit next to me on the bus and be like, yeah, you're on me on the bus, or using my leg to get, like, to get them off the seat. They're like, oh, thank you, or something like that. So it's really, I think, I don't know, this is all to say is it's a very physical country in many ways, and it doesn't always necessarily have any undercurrent of any attraction or any flirting or anything like that. It's just, I think, a way that as Americans, I think we're very, a lot of Americans who are like, I don't like hugging, I don't like touching, I don't really like anything. If I could, I'd just do a little head bow rather, or head nod rather than a handshake. And I think in Italy, it's very much a, the kissing on the cheeks and everything, the little side hugs and the whole 9 yards. So that's just something to be aware of. Not necessarily pertaining to women, but pertaining to anybody solo traveling, but as women too. It's like if you meet somebody on multiple occasions, they will naturally get friendlier.
Yeah.
Not like a shopkeeper, but I was thinking like if you're solo traveling at a hostel or something, and you meet somebody Italian, they might get like really friendly with you by the third time, because like, oh, we're friends now. So it's just a natural thing that they would do with their own friends who are Italian.
And that being said, if you feel unsafe, please say something.
Oh yeah.
Do something. Protect yourself. Set boundaries. Exactly. One thing that is just a regular street smarts thing is whenever I'm by myself, especially at night, I don't walk down streets that have nobody there, because it just feels unsafe.
That seems like a classic. Yeah, I never walked down an empty street.
Yeah, it's like a film noir scary thing, So just stay in populated places. And every other thing that we've talked about, hold on to your phone, hold on to your bag, hold on to your purse. Don't count money in front of you. Just do what you can to keep yourself from being an easy target, which, like you said earlier, sounds like victim blaming. But in this case, just try to keep yourself safe.
And going very briefly, I keep saying briefly, by the way, just because we don't want you guys to be listening too long.
We're running long,
and getting tired. But it's not enough information to make 2 episodes. We don't know too much about nightlife stuff, night clubs, parties, anything like that. But it still kind of comes to the basic thing of, if you're going to a club, if you're going to some place where there's drinking and you're not entirely sure of the crowd, never accept a drink from somebody you don't know. Always watch a bartender make the drink. If it's going to be beer, make sure they open the bottle in front of you, or pour the beer in front of you, not behind the bar somewhere. If it's going to be making a mixed drink, again, make sure it's in front of you. Make sure you can see it. Don't accept drinks from strangers. Don't accept anything from strangers.
Don't go to parties with strangers.
Don't leave your glass unattended. Don't go to parties with strangers. Yeah, that's a big one. And then again, if you ever feel just uncomfortable, just leave immediately. That's just walk out. Again, we don't know too much about like clubs. So we often go places all together though, so it's a little bit different than going alone. But that's just, I think it's the classic stuff that you would go like anywhere, but it's still it's important to kind of keep that in mind, because sometimes people suck, and that's not
inevitably there will be people who suck.
Yeah, and that's not like an Italian versus or European or American or Western Eastern thing. It's just sometimes people just suck, and
Sometimes people make sad choices.
Yeah, and they do so in Italy sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think I just like three pieces of very quick information I wanted to mention. You talked about walking around at night, and I mentioned earlier this episode, a lot of times, like Italy considers, I think, what late night a little bit different than America. Midnight is a late night in America, typically, depending where you are, because things close at like 7 and dinner's over by 8. So if you're walking around midnight, it's like you were at a club. In Rome, for instance, where a lot of people will have dinner at 9:30 and not finish until midnight, walking around at midnight is kind of like an after dinner hour, and it's not uncommon to then walk around after dinner to digest. So it's kind of like basically when people say, is it safe to walk around at night? If you're talking about 10 or 11, absolutely. There will be a lot still happening at 10 or 11. There will be shows, music, dinner. I mean, some things will be open. I think we mentioned before, like some of these, especially in the summer, some of the tourist attractions on the weekend are open to late night, to have like the late night in the ruins kind of thing. Like the Colosseum does late night tours. So there's a lot more safety, I think, in a place like that late at night than I've ever felt in America. Because I mean, Savannah, you're walking around at 10, it kind of feels like a ghost land because no one's around.
Mm-hmm.
And so like 3 a.m, I think would be considered late at night in Rome. So that's just an idea if you're talking about, what's safe, what's not safe. The other thing, or one of the other things I wanted to mention, are train stations. That's a huge question that's often asked, like, is Termini train station safe at night? Is Tiburtina, Milano Centrale, the Santa Maria del Fiore in Florence? Yes and no. And I'm going to use Rome's as a perfect example of, it might change for the Jubilee, but it's a train station where it's fairly safe for people who are unhoused or who are experiencing homelessness, who have nowhere else to go, because it's well lit, it's patrolled, it's safety in numbers, it is not heated, but there is just natural heat from like the subways and things like that. So it's a very safe place to be by and large if you're unhoused, rather than like, under an overpass or something like that. It's also where a lot of churches will bring food. So they'll do like the, kind of like, I don't know, what it was like not a soup kitchen, but where they've just,
Yeah, I don't know what it's called. They
there's a
just
name for it.
bring out meals for people experiencing homelessness.
Yeah, and there's a
Yeah.
line, and you can get pasta or something like that,
Or they hand out little sandwiches.
And that happens a lot of train stations because that's a really good hub for people to easily arrive to then get a meal, rather than having to walk somewhere that's difficult to access. So when people ask, like, are train stations dangerous, it's not necessarily like pickpocketing you have to be aware of, this and that. Sometimes it's just people who don't necessarily want to be disturbed while they're sleeping next to the train station. It's not necessarily across the board unsafe. And at the same time, I know that like there are some rougher areas around like the Naples train station, for example, especially kind of behind it, where we've stayed once near the Naples train station, and it's like just sort of sirens going and cops going every once, like every 45 minutes. It's like, oh, there's another thing being called over there. So it's like yes and no. I think yes, it's a little unsafe in comparison to like the historic center or Prati or something like that. But no, it's not unsafe in the sense, or no, it's not unsafe in the sense that it's New York City in the 80s. So that's just for perspective. And
One thing in relation to hotels and at night, especially if you're traveling alone, it's important to remember to close the doors behind you as you go into your hotel or your housing. A lot of places in Italy, whether it's a hotel or an Airbnb or homestay thing, it will have like the main front door that is shared with the whole building. That usually locks behind you. Obviously, you have to have a key to get in, and then once it shuts, it should lock behind you, but just check whenever you get there to see what the door locking situation is. And then going into your room, it kind of depends, 50-50. Sometimes it'll lock automatically. Sometimes you'll have to lock it with the key. But that is just a general safety tip for anybody, especially at night, especially alone. Make sure the door closes behind you in case there's someone behind you.
It's funny because you're talking about not going down empty streets, and one of my own paranoid things is never opening that giant door at night when there's somebody else on the street, like close to me, because I'm like, I don't want them just like sprinting at the last moment, because I feel like always see those things like movies in New York City where they open the door to their apartment, somebody follows them in, and then it's like, then no one can hear you. I'm like, no, I'm gonna be on the street. I'm gonna be screaming, like someone's gonna answer the open the window and be like, what is going on out there? And the last two things I wanted to mention very briefly, we talked about we kind of briefly talked about trains here, just in the sense of like don't carry cash and you might get stopped with your passport. But I did two other things I wanted to mention, the last two little magical sprinkles on top. One, fines here are in cash, and that isn't a scam. Like if you get fined on the train, if you get fined on the bus, that kind of thing. Or not even fines, but like if you have to pay a city tax at your hotel, and they want your passport. That's not a scam. That's a totally above board. It's more of a scam if they don't ask you for city tax and they don't ask you for your passport. That means they're trying to keep this under the table. So if you go to a hotel and they say we need $6 a person plus your passports, not a scam. They have to pay the city tax. If you don't pay it, they have to pay it, and then they get very unhappy, and they'll ask like Booking or Agoda, whoever you went through, to reimburse them from your credit card information that's on file. And same thing on the trains. If they fine you, typically it's a smaller fine then or a larger fine later down the line. And they, so it's just not a scam. It is what it is. It happens. And the last thing I wanted to mention, just specifically on trains, because it felt like in like a span of 2 weeks, people were talking about how their bags were stolen on a train. There's not that much bag theft on trains, mainly because, again, that's not where people keep their electronics. That's not where people keep their expensive devices. Like if you have a roller bag or like a big suitcase and you have like your small backpack, most people keep their expensive stuff in that small backpack. So the roller bag is like toiletries and clothes, and no one's stealing your bag. Like there's nothing there to steal. It's also not something you can easily get away with. A lot of times when somebody does have a bag go missing, it's either often it's sometimes they'll say they took my bag, but there's another, like there's a black one there. It's like, yeah, they just took the wrong one.
Mistakenly.
And so it's always good to try to, if they have like, I always like to put information on ours. We have a little like the name, the phone number, where you can reach us, that kind of stuff. It sounds, it's those silly luggage tags, but they do help, especially if somebody did take yours on accident. It helps if you can brand your bag in a way that's identifiable, whether it's with tape or something like that, just to be like, that's my bag. Stickers, something that says it's your bag. But yeah, baggage stuff is not that common. Train Italia does have a lost and found section. If you do leave your bag on a train, it has mixed results. Some people are like, I left my laptop bag on the train. I got my bag back with a laptop still in it.
Wow.
So, and then some people are like, I've never seen that bag again. But that's not necessarily, again, theft. It's just somebody was just thrown away, and they're just like, I'm not even
lost.
I'm not going to bother claiming, like putting this under the lost and found thing.
Definitely keep your valuables in a bag, that like your handbag or your backpack that you're keeping near you on the train. Keep that in your lap or on the seat next to you if that is free, or on the luggage rack above you. Don't put your laptop in a place where it could get mistaken for somebody else's bag. Keep it within eyesight, essentially. Don't be lemon and the other citrus guy and
lemon and tangerine and bullet train.
Yeah, don't lose your little Thomas the Tank Engine briefcase.
That being said, though, using that example, definitely use those luggage racks though that are at the front and the back of the train, because
for your regular luggage,
because nobody's going to take for them, and just it helps get the luggage out of the way of the train. And I think the very last thing that I wanted to mention is the fact that bag snatching isn't really a thing in Italy. I don't think we've ever seen it. I don't even think we've ever heard of people, like we don't have any friends
like handbag snatching,
handbag, purse, backpack, fanny pack, anything like that. It's like, because I think sometimes you always see like in like grainy CCTV footage, like somebody's coming by on a moped and they just snatch a bag and they drive away.
I see.
And while there's a lot of mopeds, and like especially in Naples, where I feel it'll be super easy to happen, I don't think it's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying it's never happened to people. It very much has happened. And I don't think it's Italy's famous form of theft. Again, because I think Italy's just big on not Italy as a country, but pickpockets. They want to take something in a way that will not be noticed until later. So you can't turn around and identify the person. But if somebody were to snatch your bag, even on a moped, it's like, they might not get far. There is traffic. There are people. They could crash. It's like, no, it's not it's almost like the risk isn't there. It's a lot easier to just take something when people aren't paying attention than to steal something right in front of somebody and then have them run after you and scream, thief, thief. So yeah, I just want to kind of throw that out there. Like, it's not necessarily a big worry, and at the same time, be safe with your bag. Use it on both straps on your back or on your front, which is even safer. If you're gonna use your purse, don't have it like dangling. Have it, crossbody ideally, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and hold on to it when you're in a crowd or where it can easily get snatched.
So I think that's everything. It's pretty, it's not basic, but it's pretty basic, pretty straightforward. Just essentially I mean, it's that classic thing of like when you go hiking with somebody, always go with somebody slower than you. So that way, if you ever get chased by a bear, it's then they get caught, not you. I think it's the
Wow.
same, right? Isn't that the classic joke
I
about
guess
like,
so.
you know, the sort of, you know, you always have to go with somebody slower than you. Yeah. Point is that I think
I would say use your street smarts.
that's better.
Trust your gut. Keep yourself safe. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a big thing. And really, I just, as a last note, you almost certainly will not, like using these sort of ideas, you're not going to have too much of an issue. Italy is, on average, a very safe country.
Yes.
Breaking and entering is very rare. Gun violence is so rare that it is like newsworthy when somebody is shot. It's like that's on the front page of news. It's like very, crime here I feel like is a specific type, and a lot of crime I feel like Italy is financial related. It's not necessarily violent crime.
Yes.
In specifically towards people who you mentioned earlier off mic. It's often towards people who that person knows.
Yeah.
Family members, that kind of thing, or friends. It's not necessarily to a random tourist.
Random violent crime is not really much of a thing.
Yeah. So I hope this helped and somehow we allayed your worries and not made you even
Hopefully.
more worried. That would be the dream, is that you're now thinking, wow, that's safer than I thought, and not like I had
feel
no idea
safe
there was
and
so much
prepared.
crime in Italy. So I hope this does help, because again, we just want to make sure that everyone listening to this has a really lovely trip and has a really lovely time, and you're not constantly worried about like, oh my gosh, what if somebody steals my bag or my wallet or this and that? It's, you know, because then you're just not going to enjoy the trip. You're going to be constantly just, you know, just distracted and in your own head about the whole thing. So we hope it was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And very briefly, you can obviously turn off the podcast now, but if you did enjoy the podcast, you enjoyed the episode, we would love it if you hit the follow button. It would help us out tremendously. We are going to be putting out an episode every week, every Wednesday at 11 o'clock our time, which is like 5 a.m. East Coast time and like 2 a.m. West Coast time, and other times for other parts of the world. I should have probably
Nice,
had other
you covered
things.
all your bases there.
Yeah, I think I should have had something else ready to go for that. If you'd like to also follow us on other platforms, we are Only a Bag Podcast on Instagram. You can also send us messages there. We don't have too much content there, but we will be putting more out. But I assume you want to just listen to us, not necessarily look at the content we put on Instagram. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can email us, onlyabagpodcast@gmail.com. And last but not least, we have a website, onlyabag.com, has some articles, has a contact box. It's got some fun pictures. Yeah, I mean, I think I like it. That'll be something updated more, especially in like November, as I have time to add more articles, especially about some of the things we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks. And then, of course, if you do want to support the podcast, in the description below, there will be some affiliate links. Our favorite is Trusted House Sitters, if you'd like to travel around for free and hang out with people's pets. Kind of a cool thing to do if you like pets and traveling and free.
Exactly.
My 3 favorite things.
I think that's it. That was a great roundup.
Thank you.
All right.
So without further ado, thank you all so much for listening.
Thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.